Hey there. I know I haven't posted anything in a hot minute, and I do apologize for that. I've been busy with work, school, and some other hobbies I have outside of creating content for Village. Aside from that, I've had no ideas on what to create until recently. Which brings us to this video. While I loathe to make disclaimers like this, I want to go ahead and say that if you're going to act like a 12-year-old over a character being queer, you should stop watching. The main point of this video is going to be about how the mold and Cadou have affected its victims, with a heavy focus on Lady Dimitrescu's own lesbianism. If you're going to be a bigot, your comments will be deleted. Argue with the wall and maybe get a meaningful hobby in the meantime. Anyway, moving on. So, I never really made the connection between pre-mold Cadou infected and post-infected up until recently when I was trying to do research for another topic. We know that Lady Dimitrescu was a jazz singer throughout the early to mid-1900s, only going to Romania after the Second World War ended in 1945. We can assume she had a distaste for most men during this time, likely since she would be put down simply for being a woman. The only male friends she likely would have had during this time were her bandmates. There has never been a mention of her liking men, or even of having a husband. As far as we know, she remained single for most or even all of her life. Between the times she was living in and how she would have been treated for it, I personally like to think her attraction to women has always been there, only hidden until her arrival in Romania. As for the mold and Cadou, we know that when it infects someone, it brings out their worst traits. We saw it in the Bakers in Biohazard. How? There was evidence of them being a completely normal family prior to Evelyn infecting them with the mold and using them from there. Granted, their aggressive personalities may simply be from her infection, but I digress. The Cadou itself seems to be a pure form of that same mold, unaltered by any scientists in the connections, and so, its effects would likely be much worse but more powerful, as well. I assume that's why the Lords are very powerful individuals, despite some of them having a lower affinity to the Cadou. Mother Miranda was the first infected person that we know of, and let's talk about her for a moment. It's obvious that she was an extremely devoted mother and that she did care deeply for Ava, even going as far as to want to kill herself when she lost her only daughter. It's unknown how she treated the other villagers at this time, but knowing that she must have been a kinder, gentler person pre-infection is enough to know how badly the mold has corrupted her. It's a speculation among many fans that the Black God is outright controlling her at times, or even just nudging her in the directions it wants her to go. It promises that she could find Ava again, recreate her lost daughter, and we all know how it went from there. But assuming she was a much better person pre-infection, and now seeing the obsessed, corrupted, and abusive person she has become in-game, tells us what we need to know about the mold and Cadou affecting people's psychological states. So, it brings out the worst in people, takes their pre-existing negative traits and twists them into something worse. Miranda was once a loving mother, and she has now been corrupted with obsessive thoughts of bringing her daughter back, willing to go through anything to achieve it. Let's even look at Donna Beneviento. She was a socially anxious recluse because of her past, and she now uses her Cadou-granted abilities to have a bit of power over people. She may still have a softer side, but canonically, she uses her hallucinogenic abilities to drive people insane because it's fun to her or something like that. Whether it's intentional or not, she does also kill people. She hides her toxic traits and cruel words behind her doll Angie, and uses her to talk to people for the most part. Anyway, you get where I'm going with this, right? These people were much better pre-infection, and post-infection has brought out the worst in them, and even things they may have tried to keep hidden throughout their lives. But that brings us to our main focus of this topic. Lady Dimitrescu is a noble woman, and growing up in the time period she did, she wouldn't have been allowed to be aggressive. Could she still be a narcissistic or rude person? Sure, but it wouldn't have been as bad as it is now. She seemed to care about her bandmates at least, and while it's unknown if she cared for anyone else, I assume she was a little more empathetic while she was human. I do believe she had buried her attraction to women very deep down, considering what would have happened to her if it surfaced. But she was granted a bit of freedom post-infection. She decorated her newfound home with feminine presence, only hired women, and very early on in her infection, before the Cadou would have started to change her personality a bit, she likely did flirt a bit with her staff for fun or out of curiosity. And then, gradually, her flirtations, or even normal actions, would start to become a little more sadistic. Subtle at first, but once someone connected the dots, they would see she had more in mind than simply bedding a staff member. I don't think she was ever an outwardly aggressive person until she was infected with the Cadou, and it brought it out in her, especially since she was now allowed to do whatever she wished, at least to an extent. She stopped caring about people and having any empathy for them until her daughters were reborn, and I assumed that by this point, her reputation for her castle being full of blood and death was starting to gain traction. We know that really the only people post-infection Dimitrescu cares for are her daughters and mother Miranda, both of which she sees in a familial light. But that being said, it's obvious the women in the castle are treated much better than any of the men, despite what sadistic things still happen. Women are offered positions as staff and are most likely treated rather fairly until they made a mistake, as implied in the notes found, and if that happens, they are then brought to the cellar, drained and turned into wine, and their corpses almost often wander the cellar. If they were experiments, even with the sadistic things that go on in the castle, women are treated much better, and I think this still has to do with the Cadou infecting Lady Dimitrescu. She knows she's attracted to women, but between the mind manipulation from Miranda and her negative traits being brought out nearly in full, she's unable to treat them as she would have pre-infection. She mostly only sees them as a food source now. Men, on the other hand, are not offered any bit of mercy from her or her daughters. The moment a man steps into her castle, save for Heisenberg and Duke being the exceptions, they are taken to the cellar and drained dry, only to become the scarecrows we see outside the castle in the vineyard. Even her exceptions for men are treated with outright hostility or a sense of distance, and she doesn't particularly seem to care for either outside of their usefulness to her. Anyway, while Lady Dimitrescu is a confirmed lesbian, I think it makes sense that she wouldn't necessarily be with anyone so far into her infection. We do see her as calm and collected at some points, which is likely how she was pre-infection, but she is very quick to her aggression and insults. Whatever viewpoints she had on men likely only became worse and more twisted with her Cadou implant, as well as any other negative traits she had that would come to the surface as worse than they were before. It's also interesting that she is very capable of love and care for people, considering her love for her daughters, but that, in some ways, she chooses to be this person we see in canon. I'm sure a lot of her outbursts she can no longer control thanks to the Cadou. But I do wonder if she's ever fought those sadistic urges when it came to the staff in her castle, only to lose the battle. I hope all of this made sense. In the event it didn't, here's the gist. Lady Dimitrescu is still attracted to women despite her sadistic tendencies, and this is thanks to her Cadou infection. It brings out the worst in people and likely digs up deep or hidden feelings. And this would explain why she's still much kinder to women in her castle than she is to the men, despite what we all know happens to them. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this little bit of me ranting about some lore. It's been nice trying to get back into the groove of creating content regularly and gathering my thoughts on certain topics. I hope everyone is staying safe and happy during these trying times. Remember to eat lots of food and drinks, plenty of water, and thank you so much for watching.